Thank you for being here today. My name is Eli, and I am the Content and Community Development Lead at PyTop, and I'm going to be presenting today's webinar. Before we get into it, I'll tell you just a little bit about me. I've been working as a non-traditional educator or in non-traditional education roles for more than 10 years now. I started by developing arts education for a museum in Alabama, and then I created STEM PD and summer camps through a museum here in Austin, Texas, as part of a program that was grant funded by Dell. I ran the youth and family education at a makerspace for a couple of years, and then I finally ended up at PyTop. All of which is to say that I've spent a lot of time working directly with students and educators, most of that time being focused on the relationship between technology and education. And that is why I'm excited to talk about our topic for today, which is, as you probably know, and as you can see, future-proofing your students. My goal with this is to address how things will be different in the future, how that will impact the students who are in schools today, and what I think schools can do to prepare those students through changes to the learning experience. I named the event Future-Proofing Our Students because it explained what the objective is, to future-proof our students. But before that, I actually had a different name for it, which was Learning, Work, and the Future. And it basically means the same thing, but this one doesn't explain our goal. So I changed the name for marketing and advertising purposes so that people would know, going to go to a presentation about future-proofing our students. And we are going to do that by talking about learning and work and the future. So yeah, all the same thing, just two different titles. Additionally, besides learning, work, and the future, I want to cover three other big ideas that relate to those. And those ideas are personalization, collaboration, and technology. And each of these actually maps to the three words I originally chose, learning, work, and the future, because I want to talk about personalization in learning, collaboration in work, and how technology can shape our relationship to the future. In order to future-proof our students, we need to improve their learning, and we can do that through personalization. Personalization is already coming for basically every other area of our lives, so we should definitely start looking at how we can apply it to education to help keep our students ahead of the curve. The second thing, collaboration. Collaboration is one of the most important things that I think we'll talk about today, and this one is interesting because it's the opposite of personalization in a way. I'm saying that personalization is coming, and that's for the individual, but next I'm saying that collaboration is super important, and that's for groups. So they're kind of the opposite, but both of them are true. And I'm going to talk about why collaboration is so important for the future of work and why being a collaborator, a good collaborator, is essential to future-proofing our students. And finally, I want to talk about technology and its relationship to the future. I want to talk about how it is changing our world, and this can be a helpful thing for our students rather than hurtful. Technology is one of the primary ways that we measure change. And change is scary quite often. But we need to remind ourselves that the point of all of this technology is to make our lives easier. And right now, technology can make education easier. So we're going to talk about how technology can help you right now, how it is going to continue to make things better, and why we should be excited about technology and the future and not scared of it, because we're going to be able to future-proof our children so that they're going to be prepared for the things that are ahead. So let's start by talking about personalization. The first thing that we need to say is that this is coming, and it's coming for everything. I don't just mean in education, and I don't just mean in work, but like in everything. And if you think about it, we're already kind of there. Spotify makes playlists for you based on the music that you're already listening to. Netflix does the same thing based on the shows that you're watching. Ads are tailored to you in all of your social media feeds. The stories that you see in Instagram are based on who they think you're going to like to watch the most, right? So all of that stuff is already personalized. My smart speaker gives me a custom weather report, and there is a news widget on my phone that tells me news about my interests and my local area. So all of the things that we all used to have that were the same, like, we all listened to the same radio and we all read the same newspaper, now those are personalized for us. So it's already here, and it's already coming for pretty much everything else. how can it relate to education? I'm going to handle personalization and collaboration both by asking the same questions. And the questions are, what is it? So what is personalization in education? Why does personalization matter to education? And what can we do about that now that we know what it is and why it matters? So let's start by saying what personalization in education is. Personalized learning here is defined as the efforts to tailor education to meet the different needs of the students. And that definition, taken directly from the Wikipedia, is very, very broad. Efforts to tailor education could mean a lot of things, right? There are a lot of different efforts to tailor education. And the needs of the student could mean a lot of different things. So it's a really broad definition, but that's kind of the whole idea of personalization. It's amorphous. It's not the same for all of us. It's different. So it can't just be one very clear, concise definition. So when we are talking about it, if we want to get some clarity on that, we can talk about how it relates to the students. Some students might require different learning modes or styles. Some students may learn things at different speeds. Some students may not be able to complete certain tasks or might be better with one type of assignment than another. So when we talk about personalization and learning, what we're talking about very often is students learning at their pace, tailored to their interests, and focused on their strengths and weaknesses. Now, these things that I'm mentioning, I am very much aware are not a part of every classroom right now. In fact, they're probably not happening the majority of the time in the majority of classrooms. This is not an indictment of any teacher who hasn't had the time or the resources or the opportunity to create personalized learning environments for their students. When I'm saying this stuff isn't happening, that's not me wagging my finger at people and shaming them. I'm just stating that this is not the norm yet. And that makes perfect sense. Most things don't change in a vacuum, and it's especially difficult and it takes a long time for large institutions to change. So the fact that we're not there yet with education is not entirely surprising, but I do want us to talk about why personalization in education is important. That way we can, be motivated to get there. So let's talk about why personalization matters. Why do we need personalization in education? First of all, because the world is more complex than it used to be. Things are changing at a faster rate than they've ever changed before. They are more complicated than they've ever been. And that means we just need smarter people. We need people who can handle fake information, misinformation, unreliable sources of information, information overload, people who can assess the value of conflicting statements that are being made to them, who can figure out what is valuable signal and what is just noise, and people who can figure out what to do with the right information once they have it, because it's not just enough to have the facts, but you have to know what to do with them. So the world is more complex. We need smarter people, and personalization can get us there. Another important thing is the job markets are changing. So our future workforce is probably going to have very different demands than what were expected of us when we were in school. I wanted to be an art teacher when I was a kid. And nowadays, do you know how many kids just watch a ton of YouTube and TikTok and streamers and get feedback on their own art through Instagram? Like, you can watch people teach art lessons online for free all day, every day, forever, and probably not run out of resources. You can create your own art and put it out there and get feedback and get critique in these interconnected communities. So the need for an art teacher, which is what I wanted to be when I was growing up, has completely changed. It's not the same thing that it was when I was a kid. So the job markets are changing in ways that I never would have predicted when I was growing up, or that teachers never would have predicted. The art teachers at the time, they probably thought that I could have grown up to have the exact same job as them in the exact same way and have the exact same relationship to their students. And that's just not the case. And that's true in tons of job markets. Right now, jobs that we have that look one way are probably going to look really, really different in the future. And so we need people who are going to be able to adapt to those things and who are going to be able to change. And then finally, and this is another big important reason, is that the workforce is now global. And that means that when you apply to a job, you might not just be competing with people locally, you're going to be competing with people everywhere. And so the competition is higher. And so once again, that just means we need smarter individuals. And we can make smarter individuals by improving education, and we can improve education by customizing it, by personalizing it to each individual, right? So we need to innovate to find ways to improve the learning experience for our students so that they can compete in a global workforce that is changing rapidly in a world that is more complex than it's ever been. If you're a teacher, you've probably already experienced some of this. You might have students who are really, really advanced and they get bored by the speed that everyone is at around them, right? So maybe they act out, or maybe they don't pay attention, or maybe they don't go as far as they could. A personalized learning experience could change that for them, and they could accelerate their learning in ways that they might not be able to in a traditional classroom. Conversely, maybe you have a student who's struggling because they learn differently than most of their peers, and they require extra help or extra time or different tools or different resources, different ways of learning. So imagine that you were able to give the same amount of personalization, the same amount of customization and care to each of those students' needs. One student got different resources, got extra time, got to work on things at their own pace, and that brought them up to where everyone else was able to reach. And another student was able to accelerate their learning. They weren't being held back, they weren't being bored or distracted, and they were able to explore maybe a wider range of topics than they would have been able to otherwise. Being able to do both of those things is incredible. It almost makes you every kid's private tutor. And like, what parent wouldn't want a private tutor for their kid if they had the option? This last slide is really just to hit home those ideas I talked about in terms of why we need personalization. It's why we need to do something, or why we need to do literally everything we can to improve the education situation. Jobs that are currently available for individuals without a high school diploma or higher are already going away, or they will go away. What you see in the pictures here are a fast food worker, a job site security employee, and a warehouse fulfillment worker, right? And none of those are people. So you can have, these are all jobs that I could have had right out of high school: working in a fast food place, working security, working in a warehouse. And now those jobs are literally already being taken by machines, which means that the kids who are in school today who are not working age, there might be even fewer or none of these jobs left by the time they join the workforce, which is an absolutely crazy thought. I have people in my life who held these jobs, and there are fewer of those jobs in the world now because of machines. And today what we're seeing is you see signs everywhere where there's a hiring shortage. I read articles about how the solution to hiring shortages for a lot of companies is not to find more workers, but it's to automate the jobs. It's to say, well, we can get machines to do this, and we can get them to do it pretty cheaply, so we should do that. So, that is going to be the obvious route for them as often as they can, for employers, is to automate as many tasks as possible. So we absolutely need to bring up students above the level of these jobs right here, these jobs that can be done by robots. And that brings me into what I said was, I think, maybe the most important topic for today, which is collaboration. We all know about the 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. I think they're usually in that order, but I might be wrong. They are all super important to future-proofing our students, to making them more valuable in a changing workforce. If you have someone who can think creatively and critically, and who is a clear communicator, those are valuable things. But I actually only want to focus on collaboration today. I think it's maybe the most important in terms of future-proofing, and I'll come back to why. But let's start by talking about what collaboration is. And we all probably have an idea of this to some degree, and we can probably all agree that being a good collaborator matters, but I want to look at what it is and why it matters and what we should do about it a little bit more deeply. So let's start with what we mean when we say collaboration. This quote: "Too often we use the term collaboration interchangeably with the cognate terms like cooperation and coordination." And I apologize, I could not find where I don't know where I got this quote from. I lost the original attribution, so I apologize for that. But I think it's an important enough quote that I wanted to still include it. We tend to use collaboration to mean cooperation and coordination, but I actually like the idea of breaking them down and talking about how they're different. So, for example, if you asked me to help you move, I would consider that cooperation towards a goal, right? But it's not technically my goal, right? And if you tell your kids to set the table and you give each of them instructions, you say, hey, you go and get the forks and knives, you go get the plates and glasses. When you're done, come back here for your next instruction. Each person is doing a task, but they're not really collaborating. One person's going over here, one person's going over here. They're just coming back to you and you're telling them what to do. That's not really collaboration. So collaboration at its best means that each person is in charge of their own work, largely making their own decisions or making them through discussion with the group. It's more than just being a worker that someone else is coordinating or cooperating towards someone else's goal. It's a mutually beneficial thing where each worker has a level of authority in the decision making and is trusted to do their own work towards the benefit of the whole group and of the individuals. That's a kind of complex idea, but I think that that's why this is such a valuable concept. We can coordinate machines, right? Like we can organize machines to do things, and machines can cooperate with us on our goals. But collaboration is a more complex idea, like I just said. The skills to be a good collaborator are more difficult and they're actually harder for machines to do. And that's why I think that it is so important to future proofing students. So, why do we need collaboration? Like I said earlier, the job markets are changing. As we covered when I was talking about personalization, if more and more of the simple jobs are being taken by machines, then people will need to be prepared for more complex knowledge jobs. So robots are taking a lot of jobs and new jobs are being created. And the new jobs that are being created are often knowledge work. And knowledge work frequently requires people to collaborate with each other on complex tasks. Basically, if a new job is created and a robot can do it, the robot will probably get it right out of the gate. If a new job is created and a robot can't do it, it probably requires collaboration, which makes collaboration an essential skill for future-proofing students because they're going to be competing against machines, so they need the skills machines don't have. Collaboration is required for complex tasks. Complex tasks usually require multiple skill sets, which is why they aren't good jobs for robots just yet. Collaboration is a human skill that's critical to completing complex jobs because it can involve a group of people each focused on a different area or having a different expertise and then coming together and then exchanging that expertise with one another. And that gets kind of weird and nebulous, and machines just aren't there yet. Finally, why do we need to care about collaboration? Because most people aren't naturally good collaborators. And we need to kind of acknowledge that right out the gate. We all start off on this path of self-actualization, and it takes us a while as individuals to even accept that other human beings might have their own internal lives. That's like an actual thing in psychology, is this idea that like you kind of start to understand yourself, and then you start to understand that other people might not feel the same way that you do. And if you think back to being a child and being mad about something and being frustrated that other people don't care as much about the thing that you're mad about, it's because for you it was hard to imagine the internal lives of other people. We don't start off as good collaborators. We start off as these weird individuals. So if we want students to be able to succeed in the workforce where humans have to be really good at things that robots can't do, then we need kids to start practicing 21st century skills in a way that they will be able to share them with others, right? So if you're a good critical thinker, if you're a good communicator, if you're creative, that's fine. But if you can't share that with other people, if you can't collaborate with other people, then you're not as useful to the group. And human work in the future is probably very frequently, as we've established, going to be group work. So we need to focus on making better collaborators. Just to reinforce how things are changing, this is a list of jobs. These are the fastest declining jobs in the United States, according to data from the US Bureau of Labor. The majority of these jobs don't require higher education. The majority of them are in decline because automation or some other computer technology has already started to replace them. New jobs are coming, of course, like podcast producer or UX designer and so on. But most new jobs, again, require higher education, are based in knowledge work, and the people who succeed in them are collaborating with teams of individuals so that the whole group is achieving work that machines can't do yet. The fields that are mostly future-proof are all about having skills that are hard for machines to replicate and spontaneous collaboration is a big thing that machines just don't have down yet. So I know I'm sounding like a broken record there, but like that's the key here. Is if we want to future-proof our students, we have to accelerate their education, and we have to do it in a way that improves collaboration. So I know that all of that can sound kind of scary. And so the last thing that I want to do is make a point about technology, because technology exists to make these things easier. It exists to make everything easier, but we can use it here. I know I just spent several slides talking about how like we have to work harder and we have to move faster and we have to do better for our students, and there are complex goals that we have to reach, and that can be depressing. So I want to be able to help with the solution to that. And the thing is that you as a teacher, you as someone working to shape a classroom, you don't immediately have to change all of your methods or all of your goals or strategies all at once. You don't have to reinvent the wheel either. You don't have to go out and figure this out on your own. The reason our world is changing so fast is because of the technology that we've already developed and iterated on over the course of human history. And we do that because, like I said, it makes things easier, and it can make your job easier too. I truly think that we already have technology that can help you do the things that I've talked about and outlined in this presentation, and that's what I want to cover next. And so when I talk about how technology can help, I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about how our technology can help. Yes, that is because I work for PyTop. So I'm going to talk about it through the lens of PyTop technology. But I'm also not just talking about it because I work for the company. I'm talking about it because we as a company design our products with these problems in mind. It's why I get to talk about topics like these, is because we as a company care about them. So I'm going to be using our things as examples, but the ideas can apply to lots of technology that you might already be using in your class or are thinking about using in your class. So just know that, like, yes, I'm talking about PyTop stuff, but it doesn't just apply to our stuff. And I'm not talking about it just because I work for the company. This stuff is all real and applicable in a lot of different ways. So let's talk about solutions for personalization. We want to make students better. We want to provide them more opportunities. We want to help them learn faster. And there are ways that I think technology can help us do that. One of those ways is flexible learning schedules. And this is a thing that I think is really, really valuable in the future of classrooms. And an aspect of it that I want to talk about specifically is asynchronous learning. Asynchronous learning becomes much more accessible and much easier when the learning materials involved are accessible in a digital space. They don't have to be exclusively digital, because I know not everyone always has access to the internet or a computer. But the more we make things available digitally, the easier it is going to be to have flexible asynchronous learning schedules for our students. And this is not just important because we went through /are in a pandemic. It's important because asynchronous learning helps students do that thing I talked about earlier, which is learn at their own pace. We implemented this into our further learning platform, which is where we keep all of the content that we create for PyTop products. We integrated this by allowing teachers to assign multiple projects to a student at a time. So I could give a student one assignment, and then when they finish it, give them another one, and then another one. Or I could say, you're going to get one on Monday, and then one the following Monday, regardless of whether or not you finished it. Or I could say, I'm going to give you all of them at once, and you can work on them at your own pace. You can finish them in whatever order you want, or if you get stuck on one, you can move to the next and come back once you figured out that first one. We have tried to create a system where things can be assigned to students based on their needs. Again, flexible learning schedules. This is really valuable because of what I was talking about in the beginning about maybe you have students who move really fast through things or who get bored easily. Maybe you have students who need more time or who need to work on things in a different way than other students. Asynchronous learning, the ability for those students to work on things separately and one not be, tied to the other, is going to help the two students have a personalized learning experience that meets their specific needs. And digitizing the content allows you to do that, which is why we baked that into our learning platform. Next, I think is really important to talk about open-ended project-based learning. We have integrated this into all of our challenges on Further. There are a lot of resources out there about open-ended project-based learning, and I would encourage you to, as often as you can, integrate this into your classroom. So what we've done is we've made it so that in each of our challenges, there's going to be at least one or two sections where students are bringing their own solutions or ideas or interests into the work that they're doing. So the goal might be that all the students start off with the same set of instructions. They all start off assembling the same thing. But then later we say, now what could you do to change this? Is there something that you could apply this towards in your life to solve a problem that you have? And every person might answer that differently. So at the end, when everyone comes back together, each individual classmate might have a project that looks very different from the others. And this becomes really, really valuable when those students start to collaborate, because then they can come back together and teach each other about the things that they did individually on their own. And they tend to be more engaged when they are working on projects that they decided, or when they are listening to their peers talk about projects that they decided for themselves. So open-ended projects are really great, not just for personalization, but also for collaboration. Lastly, the idea of coaching, guiding, and inspiring instead of instructing your students. So if you're doing open-ended project-based learning on an asynchronous flexible schedule, then you're probably not going to have a single worksheet or one-size-fits-all test that applies to all of your students, because your students' tasks might all be different. They might go out and do research on varied topics from each other. They might be responding to questions in different ways based on the research that they've done or the ideas that they have. And they might be producing artifacts that are unique rather than everyone filling out the exact same worksheet. So when you're doing these sorts of projects, it's not like you can stand in front of the class and just instruct. It's important for you to let the students sort of lead themselves and guide themselves through their interests and at their own pace. But it's also important for you to be able to see their work and to be able to coach them and guide them through it. So in the future of learning, if there's more personalization, then odds are you are going to be less of an instructor and more of a coach, guiding and inspiring those students. In Further, our learning platform, we do this by having challenges with prompts that can ask students questions, open-ended questions. I always encourage teachers to use text prompts as a place for students to maybe cite references if they've done research, or post links to specific things that they found and used in their work. If you're asking open-ended questions and you're asking them to provide those things, then you're able to see what they're doing and give them feedback on it. Similarly, because of the fact that teachers and students can comment back and forth on assignments in Further, teachers are able to provide guidance and inspiration by directing students to new resources. So if a student says, here are the things that I looked at, and a teacher can see those, they can comment and say, hey, this is great. I would love it if you went a little bit further, or maybe you should also look into this topic, which might be helpful to you. So look for tools that allow you to do that, that allow you to have open communication back and forth, that allow the students to do open research and to share their resources with you so that you can guide them and coach them through it, rather than just a worksheet or a form where they fill out and everyone's asked the same questions and answering in the exact same way, where you're looking for, yes, they all said the exact same thing, so they all passed, or this person didn't say the exact same thing, so they failed, right? The more open it is and the more flexible it is, the better and more personalized that learning experience is going to be. Here's an example of that I've got from Further. This is actually a little bit old, so Further, our learning platform, looks different now. But this is an example where a student was doing work inside of the code, and they were able to comment, and say, hey, something went wrong here. I'm not sure what it is. Can you help me? And as a teacher who's guiding students for their own work, you're able to see what they did. You're able to see the questions that they're asking, and you're able to give them feedback in real time and say, hey, go back and look through this again. What have you changed so far? You're able to have a very open conversation. And this could be specific to one student or one group of students, while another group of students is maybe doing something entirely different. They're on a different part of it. And, if they're doing this asynchronously, then you're probably not going to have students raising their hand in the middle of the class and asking a question out loud for absolutely everyone to hear. Like, I'm not going to be distracting other students by asking my question, because I'm able to do it online. I'm able to do it in text. I'm able to do it, after hours or before school starts. And again, that is that flexible, open, asynchronous way of doing things. And I think that that's really important for personalization. So that's personalization, and that's how technology can kind of help build those situations and help shape the way that we're personalizing learning in a classroom. But let's talk about collaboration. Obviously, we want to encourage collaboration in a classroom, and I think one of the ways to do that is just to assign more group work. This is a small first step, and it's not going to solve all of the problems. And I know that assigning group work can sometimes be frustrating. We all know the trope of one kid not showing up but still getting the grade. something that I like about our platform is the ability to see students' work as they progress. So if you give an assignment to a group, you can easily request that each student make a specific contribution through commenting and adding their own input to that assignment. You can keep track of how groups are working as they go and get visibility on it in real time. I really like that. Another thing that I think is important that we do is adding a share phase. We do this even on assignments that could be done individually, where students are working alone. We still, at the end, ask them to come back together and share what they've done with the rest of the class. I talked about this a little bit earlier when I was saying that if students are doing personalized work and then they come back together and share that work with the other students in the class, people are going to be more engaged. Let's say that you have two students who are each doing an assignment individually, and at the end, there's a personalized section to it. It says, use what you've learned here to solve a problem in your own life, document that, and then come back and we're going to share it. Well, even though up to that point, they've all done the same work, if they have a share phase and there's a personalized part of it, then when they come back together, one person might say, I solved this problem and I did it this way. Another person might say, I solved a totally different problem and I did it this way. And they go, oh, well, these two things can actually overlap. They can collaborate and build something new that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Or you might have two students who solve the same problem, but solve it in slightly different ways. And they're able to talk about those. Maybe one person says, I was able to do this really, really quickly. And another person says, I did this and it worked a little bit better. They're able to share that information and improve upon the shared sort of idea that they were both working on independently. So there's a lot of value that can come from adding personalization to work and then adding a share phase, even if the work is individual. And then finally, allow students to collaborate just on portions of assignment. So if you're saying, I can't assign group work all of the time, that's totally fine. Maybe most of the work is independent, but maybe at the end, students come together and build something collaborative out of it. Or maybe they all collaborate on the first part of an assignment, and then they take the work they've done and they each take it off into their own personalized independent assignment at the end. This is still going to allow them to collaborate, even if you're not constantly exclusively assigning group work. If you find that to be too difficult, just start doing it in chunks here and there. This is a really interesting way to sort of change the dynamic of what's happening in a classroom. And I think it's totally possible, especially more so when you start adding technology and asynchronous learning into things. So an example of that, this is one of our projects on Further. And what I've done here is I've actually taken an assignment that's designed to be able to be done by an individual, and I've broken it down into sections. And you could have different people each do one of these sections. So you could take an assignment for individuals and you could say, you're going to do the hardware component of it, you're going to do the software component, and the third person is going to work on the design. And that's what you're seeing here is one person's assembling PyTop hardware, one person is running the code that's on our website, and a third person is designing maybe like a cardboard robot enclosure for the whole thing inside of Tinkercad, and then they would all come back together and build that as a group. This is not something that is as easy to do without technology, without the ability to have visibility on what they're doing, without the ability to take an assignment, break it up into portions, hand it off to different people in this way, and then all still be able to see what the others are working on at the same time. Using digital platforms to share assignments so that people can have real-time visibility on the work that their peers are doing is kind of a huge change to the way that we're able to do work. And it's super important because it's how they're going to be working in the real world anyway. So they might as well start learning to do that in the classroom. That's going to give them that advantage when they move forward. They're going to be able to collaborate because they started practicing it earlier. Technology helped make that possible. With PyTop, every one of our lessons has this. Every one of our lessons has a hardware element, a software element, and additional creative work. So you could break those up, or you could say everyone's going to do the first two parts separately, and then maybe break up into groups to do the third part and combine, or everyone's going to do this part of it themselves and then come back together and assess. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that, and all of the assignments can be broken down, honestly, in a million different ways where they can be personalized and tailored to individuals and groups based on your needs. I encourage you to always look for platforms and tools that allow you a level of flexibility so that you can actually shape things to the needs of your classroom. So that was a lot. Let's focus just on the big ideas here. Personalization is going to improve learning for the individual, and we need that. We need people to be smarter, faster, because the world is getting more complex. So if we want to future-proof our students, teach them more, teach them faster, teach them better, and we can do that through personalized learning. Collaboration, a human skill, robots can't do it yet, or they can't do it as well as we can. And that is going to make it essential to the future of work. If you want to have a successful workforce, they're going to be doing knowledge work, and they're going to be collaborating with other people on complex tasks. So collaboration is one of the most valuable skills that you can teach. And finally, technology is going to help foster personalized learning and collaboration by providing new tools and new ways to use tools. So don't look at technology as a burden, but look at it as a resource that can help you teach students faster, that can help you teach students better, that can help your students interact with one another and interact with you. It can change classrooms in ways that are helpful rather than harmful. And so I encourage you to think of it that way, as an asset, and always look for the little ways that you can integrate technology as a time saver and as a way to sort of make life better for you and the students through personalization, through collaboration, and just through simplifying the things that you're doing and allowing you to do more. So those are the big ideas. If we have any questions in the chat, Marielle, I can take those now. If not, then we can stop there, and I will thank everyone for their time.
There's no questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, we are going to make this presentation available online. So if you want to see it again, or if you want to share it with someone who missed it, you definitely can. We will include my email address there, as well as Marielle. We can probably include yours as well. Marielle and I both work creating content for the PyTop 4 and for all of our products. So we love talking about how to use these things in education, how to integrate this technology into a classroom. So if you do have any questions later on, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to share the presentation, and we are going to be doing another one in, I believe, 2 weeks. Is that correct, Marielle?
Yes, on the 17th, I think.
All right, and you'll be leading that one, and I'll probably be panel moderating. So if we don't have any questions, thank everyone. I thank you all for your time, and we will see you in the next one.